Ji-woo never thought she would fall in love with a foreigner. She was a simple woman, raised in a traditional Korean family where family values and cultural customs were everything. But when she met David, a Nigerian businessman in Seoul, her life took an unexpected turn. It all began at a small cafe in Seoul, where Ji-woo worked as a barista. She was in her mid-20s, independent and hardworking, trying to build a life for herself despite the judgment from her traditional family. One day, a tall man with dark skin and kind eyes walked into the cafe. His name was David. He was from Nigeria, working on a business project in Korea. David ordered a coffee, and as Ji-woo made it, they exchanged polite small talk. He was confident, warm, and full of life. His laughter was contagious. David shared stories about his hometown in Lagos, his culture, his family, and the hospitality of Nigerians. Ji-woo, in return, told him about her Korean upbringing and the traditions she held close. What started as casual conversations soon grew into something deeper. Despite their differences, a strong connection formed between them, one neither could deny. David admired Ji-woo's kindness, her gentle spirit, and her ability to make him feel at home in a foreign country. Ji-woo was captivated by his confidence, his positive attitude, and his deep understanding of the world beyond Seoul. As their friendship blossomed, so did their feelings for one another. Ji-woo knew that her family would never approve of a relationship with a foreigner. When Ji-woo's parents found out, they were furious. They forbade her from seeing David again. "You are disgracing our family," her father said coldly. "A Korean woman should not marry a foreigner, especially a black man." David tried to reason with them, but it was no use. Their love couldn't last. David's business contract was ending, and he had to return to Nigeria. The day he left, Ji-woo felt a deep sadness she couldn't shake off. She knew their time together was short, but she never expected it to end so suddenly. Before David left, he promised to keep in touch. But after he returned to Nigeria, the calls and letters became less and less. Ji-woo was left with a sense of emptiness, questioning whether their love had been real. It wasn't until a few months later, when she started feeling weak and nauseous, that she discovered the truth. She was pregnant. The news hit Ji-woo like a wave crashing against the shore. At first, she didn't believe it. She had never imagined that her short, passionate relationship with David would lead to this, her carrying his child. Alone in her small apartment in Seoul, she stared at the pregnancy test in disbelief, the pink lines staring back at her, a stark reminder of the reality she now faced. Ji-woo sat on the edge of her bed, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. David was back in Nigeria, and there was no way for her to reach him. She had tried calling him a few times after his departure, but his phone went unanswered, and his emails went unread. Slowly, she accepted that their relationship, like many others, had been a fleeting moment in time. She couldn't keep waiting for him. Ji-woo was well aware of her family's strict views on relationships, especially one with someone from outside of Korea. Her parents had never approved of David, and the thought of telling them about her pregnancy filled her with dread. She feared their disappointment and their angry rejection. But the reality of the situation was undeniable. She was going to have a child, and she needed to decide what to do. After a few days of uncertainty, Ji-woo made a decision. She would keep the child. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she loved the idea of having someone to care for, someone who would need her. Ji-woo was determined to be a good mother, even if it meant doing it alone. But even as she made the decision, fear crept in. She wondered how she would raise a child in a society where mixed-race children were seen as different, even inferior. How would they react to the news of her having a child with a Nigerian man? The next few months were a blur of quiet anxiety and growing anticipation. Ji-woo tried to keep her pregnancy a secret from her family for as long as possible, but the changes in her body soon made it impossible to hide. Her mother, a proud Korean woman who had always held conservative values, was the first to notice. "Ji-woo," her mother said one evening, her voice laced with concern. "What's going on? Are you pregnant?" Ji-woo tried to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. She nodded silently. Her mother's face fell. "But, what about your future? What about our family's name? What will people say?" It wasn't the supportive response Ji-woo had hoped for. Her mother's words stung. But Ji-woo had made up her mind. She wasn't going to let anyone's disapproval stop her from being the mother she knew she could be, even if it meant doing it alone. Ji-woo gave birth to a baby girl on a cold winter morning. The baby had soft curly hair and brown skin, different from the other babies in the hospital. Ji-woo named her Era, which means beautiful in Korean. To her, Era was perfect, but not everyone saw it that way. As Era grew older, Ji-woo noticed the first signs of prejudice. When Era was just 6, she started school. Ji-woo had hoped that children wouldn't care about her daughter's skin color, that they would just see her as another kid. But the reality was far from her hopes. From the time Era entered school, she realized she was different. She was just like them, wasn't she? She spoke Korean, ate Korean food, and had a mother who was Korean. But the world saw her differently. She wasn't just a child. She was a mixed-race girl in a society that wasn't ready for her. While her classmates all had the same pale skin and black hair, Era's dark complexion and curly hair made her stand out. At school, the other kids started. Some whispered. Others laughed. "Why is your skin dirty?" a boy asked her one day. She ran home crying, asking her mother why she looked different, her small hands scrubbing at her arms, trying to make her skin match her mother's. Ji-woo held her close. "You are not dirty, my love. You are special. You have the beauty of 2 cultures inside you." Ji-woo's heart broke for Era, knowing that her daughter was caught between 2 worlds. One that rejected her for her skin color, and the other, a world she had never known. As Era grew older, the bullying didn't stop. It only became more intense. Her classmates often referred to her as the half-Korean girl, even though she had grown up in Korea. One day, a group of girls in the cafeteria stared at her from across the room, whispering. Era sat down with her tray of food, hoping to go unnoticed. But one of the girls, Jiun, walked over and asked, "Are you really Korean?" she sneered. Era nodded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Yes." Jiun smirked. "So then why are you different? You look weird." Era clenched her fists. "I was born here. I speak Korean. This is my home too." But it didn't matter. She was different, and to them, different meant she didn't belong. That evening, Era stormed into the apartment, slamming the door behind her. "Why do they hate me, Mom? I'm not doing anything wrong. I just want to fit in, but they keep making me feel like I'm nothing." Her voice trembled with frustration. Ji-woo had never seen her daughter so upset. She had always known Era faced discrimination, but this was different. It was no longer just a matter of teasing. It was an identity crisis. Her daughter, who had once been so proud of both her Korean and Nigerian roots, now felt torn between 2 worlds. One that rejected her for her skin color, and the other, a world she had never known. Ji-woo sat beside her daughter, taking her hands into her own. "Era, you are not nothing. You are a beautiful mix of 2 worlds, 2 cultures. People might not understand you, but that doesn't make you any less than them. Don't let their ignorance define you." Era sniffled, wiping her tears. "But how do I make them see that? How do I show them that I belong?" Ji-woo paused, her heart heavy. She knew the pain of trying to fit into a world that wasn't ready to accept you. Sometimes the world won't change until we change the way we see ourselves. You have to believe that you belong, even when others don't. Your worth isn't determined by them. It's something no one can take away. But Era wasn't sure. The prejudice she faced felt like an unshakable wall, and she wondered if her mother's words could truly change anything. That night as she lay on her bed, unable to sleep, she traced her own features with her fingers. Her curls, her deep brown skin, her full lips, she looked nothing like the people around her. She whispered to herself, "Would I be accepted if I were in Nigeria? Would people accept me the way I am and treat me differently?" But that question carried its own fears. Would her father want to see her after all these years? Did he even know she existed? It wasn't just the school bullies. The rejection came from her own family as well. Ji-woo's parents, especially her mother, had never fully accepted Era. While they loved their daughter, they made it clear that they didn't understand why Ji-woo had chosen to raise a child with a Nigerian man. Their disapproval extended to Era. During one of South Korea's traditional festivals, Ji-woo had brought Era to visit her parents. The visit was meant to be a joyous occasion, a chance for Era to bond with her grandparents. But the cold stares from Ji-woo's mother made it clear that Era wasn't welcome in their home. "She's too dark," her mother had whispered to Ji-woo one evening, just loud enough for Era to overhear. "She doesn't look like you. She's too foreign." The words stung, but Ji-woo had been quiet, unable to defend her daughter without risking more tension with her own parents. Ji-woo had always been caught between 2 worlds, her love for Era and her desire for her family's acceptance. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't make them understand that her daughter was a part of her, a part of their family. That night, Era had asked her mother why her grandparents didn't like her. Ji-woo had hugged her tight, brushing the question aside with a gentle smile, but inside, her heart was breaking. One evening, Ji-woo and her parents sat down for what was meant to be a peaceful dinner. Era, wearing a beautiful Nigerian dress her mother had gifted her, walked into the room with a soft smile. But her grandmother's face turned cold the moment she saw her. "Why is she wearing that?" she asked sharply, eyeing the dress with clear disapproval. You know we don't wear such things here. You're Korean, not Nigerian. Era froze, her smile fading. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Jiwoo tried to step in gently. Amma, please. I've taught her to embrace both sides of who she is, Korean and Nigerian. Her mother's voice was firm. She's going to get hurt living like this. The world isn't kind to children like her. You should know that. The words stung Jiwoo. She had hoped that, with time, her family would learn to accept Era. But it was clear their hearts hadn't changed. That night, Jiwoo and Era sat together on the couch in silence. Jiwoo wanted to apologize, to somehow explain that even love couldn't erase ignorance. I'm sorry, Era, Jiwoo whispered, brushing her daughter's curls away from her eyes. I wish I could make them see you the way I do. Era gave a small nod, her voice barely above a whisper. It's okay, Mom. I just wish I belonged somewhere. Jiwoo held her tighter. You belong with me. And one day, I promise, you'll find a place that feels like home. As Era got older, Jiwoo worked tirelessly to support them both. She took on long hours at a small restaurant, often too exhausted to eat when she came home. Era noticed how tired her mother looked. The stress weighed on her too. One afternoon, Jiwoo collapsed during a shift. The restaurant manager called Era immediately. When Era arrived at the hospital, she saw her mother lying on the bed, pale, thin, but still trying to smile. Yama! Era held her mother's hand, tears streaming down her face. You have to stop pushing yourself. I'm okay, Jiwoo whispered. I just need to rest. But the doctor pulled Era aside and told her the truth. Your mother is exhausted. Her immune system is weak. She needs proper rest, nutrition, and care. Era felt the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders. They had bills piling up and no support from family. She had to find a job, fast. Era searched everywhere, cafes, shops, late-night cleaning jobs, but the pay wasn't enough. One rainy evening, she bumped into someone outside a business building. She was in a hurry, too distracted to look up. Watch where you're going, a cold voice snapped. She looked up and froze. It was Minjun Kong, the notorious heir of Kong Group. Everyone knew him. His face was always in the tabloids, his name attached to scandals. And here he was, right in front of her. I'm sorry, she muttered, stepping aside. Minjun narrowed his eyes. Wait, you're that girl, aren't you? The mixed one. Era felt a familiar sting. She was used to that label. That girl. But it still hurt. I don't have time for this, she said, trying to walk away. But Minjun's tone shifted. You came from a job interview, right? She turned back, confused. I might have a job for you. She stared at him in disbelief. What kind of job? Minjun lowered his voice. I need a wife. Not a real one, just for show. A contract marriage. In exchange, I'll pay for your mother's medical expenses. Everyone wins. Era's breath caught in her throat. Was he serious? Why me? She asked. Because my father would never approve of you, he said bluntly. And that's exactly what I need. Someone they'll hate enough to make them reconsider the woman they chose for me. It sounded insane. It was insane. But then she thought about her mother, lying in a hospital bed, slowly getting worse. I'll do it, she said, the words spilling from her lips before she could think. The next morning, Era stood outside Minjun's mansion, a place that felt like another world. The gates were tall, the gardens perfect, and everything around her screamed luxury. She took a deep breath, her stomach tight with nerves. Ready? Minjun asked, holding the gate open. His voice was gentler now, almost kind, but his eyes still held a hint of distance. Era nodded slowly, pushing down her fear. Let's go. Minjun stopped in front of a door. This will be your room, he said. You can unpack your things. I'll have someone bring in clothes for you. She stepped inside slowly. The room was beautiful, too beautiful. A king-sized bed draped in crisp white linens, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a sweeping view of the city skyline, and an ensuite bathroom that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. As she set her small bag down, there was a soft knock. A housekeeper entered quietly, arms full of neatly folded clothes and a pair of new shoes. She placed them gently on the bed and bowed slightly before leaving without a word. Era stared at the items, unsure whether to feel grateful or swallowed by the weight of it all. She walked over to the window, staring out at the sprawling city below. Seoul had always been home, but now, it felt like a distant memory. This mansion wasn't a place of comfort. It felt like a prison she had willingly entered. The first few days were a blur of awkward dinners and silent exchanges. Era played her part, sitting beside Minjun at social events, wearing the clothes he had bought for her, smiling at the right moments. But beneath the surface, she felt like she was drowning. Every step she took in this world felt unnatural. Every word she spoke was a performance. At a gala one evening, Era stood next to Minjun, doing her best to appear at ease. But the whispers followed her wherever she went. People stared, some with curiosity, others with judgment. "She's not even Korean, is she?" A woman whispered to her companion, eyeing Era with disdain. Era clenched her fists, fighting the urge to run. She was used to this. She had dealt with similar comments her whole life. But tonight, with the spotlight on her, it hurt more than usual. Minjun must have noticed the tension in her posture. He turned to her, his voice low. "Ignore them. They're just curious." Era tried to smile, but the words felt hollow. "It's not easy to ignore." "I know," he said softly. "But we're in this together. You don't have to go through it alone." For the first time since they had entered this arrangement, Era looked at him. Not as her employer, not as the man she was pretending to be married to, but as someone who might actually understand her pain. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, something that made her heart skip a beat. One evening, Era stood alone on the balcony, gazing out at the city skyline. The stars above were dim, and the cool breeze brushed against her skin, offering a rare moment of peace amid the chaos of her new life. She was lost in thought when she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Minjun standing in the doorway, his gaze fixed on the night. There was an intensity in his eyes that made Era's heart flutter unexpectedly. "Isn't it beautiful?" she asked, gesturing to the view below. "The city, I mean." Minjun nodded but didn't answer right away. He stepped closer, the space between them narrowing. "It is," he said finally, his voice quiet. "But sometimes it feels like I'm living in a cage. Everything looks perfect on the outside, but it's all a facade." Era watched him, sensing the heaviness in his words. "I've never told you this before," Minjun continued, his voice softer than usual. "But my family, they've never really accepted me. Not for who I am." He looked down, as if gathering the courage to speak. "My father, he's always had this vision of who I should be. When I was younger, I tried to be everything they wanted, did everything to make them proud. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. I was never the son they wanted. The more I tried, the more I lost myself." His voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible. "My family's expectations, their control. They don't care about me, only their legacy. They want me to marry someone who fits their image." Era took a steadying breath, her voice calm but filled with compassion. "Minjun, you don't have to live for them. You don't owe them anything. You deserve to live for yourself, to choose your own life, not the one they've planned for you. You don't have to do this alone," she said softly. "We're both in this together, even if it's just for the time being." For the first time, Minjun looked at her fully, his gaze searching. "And what about you, Era?" he asked, his voice low. "What do you want?" Era met his eyes, her heart steady. "I want to know who I am," she said softly. "I want to understand both sides of my heritage, to find a place where I belong, where I don't have to hide who I am." Minjun took a moment to consider her words, then spoke with quiet understanding. "You deserve that, Era. And if finding your father will help you understand yourself better, then go ahead. Maybe that's what you need, to piece together that part of you that's been missing." That night, as they sat together in silence, something shifted. The air between them no longer held the weight of a contract, but the warmth of quiet understanding. Era had always seen Minjun as the distant, untouchable heir, cold, composed, and out of reach. But in his vulnerability, she saw something else. A man just as trapped as she was, caught between expectation and identity. Someone who understood what it felt like to not fully belong. The days that followed felt different. Minjun started going with Era to the hospital. He didn't talk much, but his presence said more than words ever could. Her mother was getting better, slowly but surely, thanks to the help Minjun had provided. Era's heart was full of gratitude, deeper than anything she could express. For the first time since their contract began, Minjun didn't look at Era like a deal he had to complete. He looked at her like someone who mattered, a woman who deserved kindness, peace, and love. He didn't just want to play his part anymore. He wanted to be there for her, to protect her, to see her smile. One evening, Era sat alone in the hospital lobby, waiting for her mother's checkup to finish. Her hands were shaking slightly as she wrung them in her lap. It felt like time had stopped, like she was standing between her painful past and an uncertain future. Then Minjun walked in. He wasn't wearing a suit, just jeans and a sweater. His eyes softened when he saw her, and he walked toward her slowly, carefully. "You okay?" he asked gently. Era looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm scared. She's all I have. If I lose her, I'll be completely alone." Minjun sat beside her and reached for her hand. His touch was warm and steady. "You're not alone," he said, his voice calm and sincere. "Not anymore." Era stared at him, her eyes filling with tears. No one had ever said that to her before. In that moment, something shifted inside her. For the first time in a long while, she felt something real, hope. Maybe she didn't have to face the world alone. Maybe someone truly cared. As the days grew warmer, so did their hearts. Era and Minjun began spending more time together. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They shared quiet meals, laughed over the smallest things, and talked late into the night about their dreams, childhood memories, and the fears they had buried deep inside. With Minjun's support, Era began searching for her father. She stared at the old photo her mother had shown her years ago, a Nigerian man with a kind smile, holding her mother's hand. She had often wondered what life might have been like if he had stayed. An idea sparked in her heart. She stood up, grabbed her phone, and uploaded the photo online with a simple caption. "If anyone knows this man, please help me find him. He's my father. I just want to know where I come from." It was a step into the unknown, but for the first time, Era wasn't afraid. She was ready to find her roots and perhaps open her heart to the man who had helped her heal. The photo spread quickly. Friends shared it, strangers offered encouragement, and soon, someone from Lagos, Nigeria, recognized the man. A week later, Era's phone buzzed with a new message. Just a few quiet words that turned her world upside down. "Hello. My name is David. I believe I'm your father." Her breath caught. Her hands trembled. Tears blurred her vision as she read the message over and over again. He saw it. He remembered. He had been out there all this time. Later, when she showed the message to her mother, Jiwoo stared at the screen in silence. Her eyes softened with distant memories before she finally whispered, "He was a good man, but life pulled us apart before we had the chance to hold on." Over time, Era and David began to talk. Their conversations started cautiously, but soon they laughed, shared memories, and rebuilt the bond that had been lost. He told her about his life in Nigeria, his wife, their children, and how much he regretted losing contact with Jiwoo. Meanwhile, the tension between Minjun and his family reached a boiling point when they discovered he was still holding onto the marriage contract with Era. His father, a commanding figure who had always controlled every aspect of Minjun's life, was furious. "You're ruining the family's name, Minjun," Chairman Kong shouted during a family dinner. "How could you marry someone like her? She's not even Korean. And now the world will think we've lowered ourselves to this farce." Era felt the sting of his words, even though she tried to keep her face neutral. She had expected nothing less from Minjun's family, but hearing it so plainly still hurt. His father didn't let up, his disappointment palpable as he continued berating his son. Minjun stood, his face pale and his fists clenched. For a moment, Era thought he might walk away. But instead, he took a deep breath and turned to face his father. "I'm not going to marry anyone you choose for me," Minjun said firmly, his eyes steady with resolve. The room went silent. His family exchanged confused glances, unsure how to react to this bold declaration. "This marriage is real to me," he added, briefly looking at Era before turning back to his family. "It's not just for show anymore." Era's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what Minjun meant, but she felt a shift in him, a change she hadn't expected. It was as though he was finally starting to understand that their contract marriage was no longer just a business arrangement. It had become something more. But was she ready to admit it? She wasn't sure. Era's feelings for Minjun had grown deeper than she'd ever imagined. She had entered the marriage with one goal, money for her mother's medical bills. But now, she wasn't sure where she stood with him. The line between their fake marriage and something real was starting to blur, and Era didn't know if she was ready for that kind of change. Minjun, too, seemed conflicted. He had spent so long pushing others away, convinced that love was just a distraction. But Era was different. She wasn't like the women his family had chosen for him. She had her own strength, her own struggles, and something in him began to admire that. But they were both still trapped in their own worlds. Era was torn between her growing feelings for Minjun and her fear of being rejected. She had always been the outsider, and the fear that this love might be just another fleeting dream weighed heavily on her. The tension in the mansion was unbearable, especially after Minjun's bold stand. His family was still in shock over his refusal to follow their wishes. His father, still furious, couldn't hide his disappointment. "You've chosen her over everything we've built, over your own future," his father thundered. "This is madness, Minjun. You're throwing away everything we've worked for." But Minjun remained calm. His decision was made. He had spent so many years trying to please his family, but none of it had ever felt real. No amount of wealth, status, or the women they'd chosen for him. None of it mattered. Only Era mattered. I can't live my life pretending anymore, he said quietly, but with firm conviction. Era is real. This marriage is real. His stepmother, eager to manipulate the situation, tried to discredit him, suggesting that his decision was reckless and immature. But Minjun wasn't listening. The more his family pushed back, the clearer it became that he had been suffocating under their expectations for far too long. And for the first time, he saw Era not just as his contract wife, but as someone who truly understood him. Despite all the complexities of their union, Era had become more than he ever expected. She had become his anchor. That night, after the confrontation with his family, Minjun found Era in the garden, looking up at the stars. She seemed lost in thought, as if the weight of everything was finally catching up to her. Era, Minjun began softly, stepping closer to her. I know this started as a contract. I know I told you I couldn't fall in love with you. But I was wrong. Era turned to him, her heart racing. She had no idea how to respond. His words echoed in her mind, but the reality still felt so complicated. How could she trust him? How could she believe he wasn't just saying what she wanted to hear? I don't know how to navigate this either, she replied, her voice trembling slightly. But I've never been more confused in my life. I don't know what's real anymore. Minjun reached out and gently took her hand in his. I want to figure this out with you, Era. Not because of the contract, not because of my family's demands, but because I care about you. Era's heart skipped a beat. For the first time since they had started this arrangement, she felt that maybe, just maybe, there could be a future for them, if she could trust him. But doubts still lingered in her chest. The fear of being hurt again, the fear of losing herself in a relationship that started with a lie, was hard to shake. The weeks after Minjun's declaration were filled with uncertainty, but also hope. He had truly chosen Era, and as much as it scared her, she could no longer deny that she had chosen him too. Their marriage, which had begun as a cold transaction, had turned into something more. Something real. They began facing the challenges of their union together. His family's continued disapproval, the media scrutiny, and even their own personal doubts. But through it all, their bond deepened. They learned to communicate in ways they hadn't before, sharing their fears, their dreams, and their growing love. Era had grown so much over the months. She had faced the hurt of being rejected by both her Korean and Nigerian identities. She had learned to accept herself, despite the judgments and prejudices from those around her. And now she was learning how to love and be loved in return. Something she had never allowed herself to believe was possible. A few months later, Minjun surprised her with a proposal. A real one this time, not bound by a contract or obligation. They were in a beautiful garden, the sun setting behind them. Minjun got down on one knee, his eyes full of sincerity. Era, I've spent my whole life trying to meet everyone else's expectations, but I've realized I've been ignoring the most important thing, my own happiness. And you make me happy. Will you marry me? Not because of a contract, but because I love you. Tears welled up in Era's eyes as she looked at him, overwhelmed by the sincerity of his words. The weight of their journey together, the struggles, the pain, and the growth, they had come so far. Yes, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, I will. Their wedding was a celebration, not just of their love, but of everything they had overcome. It was an event unlike any other, blending both Korean and Nigerian traditions, a perfect reflection of their unique backgrounds and the unity they had found in each other. Among the guests was David, Era's father, who had flown all the way from Nigeria. He stood beside Ji-woo, his eyes glassy with emotion. Together, they watched their daughter, this beautiful, strong mixed-race woman, walk down the aisle with grace and dignity. Minjun stood by her side, their hands intertwined, a promise to face whatever came their way together. As they walked down the aisle, Era knew one thing for certain. This love was real, and it had triumphed over everything that had tried to tear them apart. The girl who had once been rejected by both worlds had finally found her place. A home in love, a family reborn, and a future wide open. She looked at her mother and father, then at the man beside her. She wasn't broken. She was whole. And this was only the beginning. The end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more captivating stories.